Welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the monthly live mineral webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, the SMMP, and Blue Cap Productions. Tune in on the first Wednesday of every month and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live. Hi, welcome to Mineral Talks Live. Today is Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022, and we are really excited that you could be joining us today. Normally, we're broadcasting from Honolulu with me being there and Raquel being somewhere in Massachusetts and Elöise wandering around France. But for this special episode, we are all three of us broadcasting live from Tucson at the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. So we're really excited that you can join us today. Mineral Talks Live is the monthly mineral talk show where we sit down with curatrix, curators, collectors, dealers, artists, media people, researchers, everybody cool in the mineral collecting world. And, we've also done some lapidary and gem stuff, and we hope to do more of that. But we sit down with them and we talk to them and we get to know them and we get to learn what they do in this industry that we all love so much. So this is the most fun mineral talk show on the internet, and we're really happy that you can join us. Now, this talk show isn't one where it's just me talking to the guest and you as an audience aren't involved. You are involved via the chat and the Q&A functions, both of which you'll see at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom window. While my guests and I are talking, we generally don't read those chats, but if you have any kind of question, you can type it in there, and Raquel and Elöise are going to be checking out those chat windows, and they may interrupt occasionally and address those questions directly. If it's a general question that can wait till the end of the show, go ahead and fire it off into the Q&A section, and we will get to those at the end of the show, and we'll have our guest address those directly. Typically, 40 minutes into the show, we have a quick-fire 5 question, but we don't have this year, so I'm going to play it a little bit differently, and Bob and I are going to have a little bit of fun. Speaking of Bob is our special guest today. Now, Bob is a fantastic geologist. He has a great background you're going to learn from. He's also started a company called Geology Adventures, which is a fantastic company because it takes people who show some kind of interest in the mineral collecting world and actually takes them out in the field, educates them, and exposes them to this fantastic world that we all love so much, and there's a strong focus on children. So I can't wait till Bob tells you a little bit about that, and we get to learn a lot more about Bob's background. But first, Bob is a passionate and prolific field collector, and every year, typically at the Westward Look show, we recognize a special program that the Mineralogical Record put out called the American Mineral Heritage Award. And what that does is it awards an individual who is still living it's a lifelong accomplishment for collecting in the field and contributing to the mineral collecting world. And so we are really happy to announce that Bob is the 2022 recipient of that award. And typically at the start of this event that is, as I said, usually at the Westward Look show, we have Dr. Jean Meieran giving a special presentation. So we're going to start this episode with Dr. Jean Meieran, and as Elöise likes to call him, Pookie, giving the presentation for the 2022 recipient of the American Mineralogical Heritage Award, Bob Jackson, and then Bob and I are going to have a little sit-down interview. So I'm going to pass the camera over to Jean. Jean, take it away, my friend.
Well, hello, everybody. I truly regret that I'm not able to be in Tucson now, and I probably am not going to be able to make it to Tucson this year, which will be the first time in probably 35 years where I'm not able to make the show, but circumstances dictate otherwise. But the Mineral Heritage Award goes on in spite of COVID, in spite of absences, in spite of serious accidents like the winner 2 years ago, Mike New, had just prior to the awarding of his Heritage Award. This year, we are fortunate to be able to do it again, and through the miracle of of electronics and Zoom and all that kind of stuff, we can get together and have a pretty nice award ceremony for Bob. Bob, of course, is distant from me right now, and I am distant from Tucson, and Tucson is distant from Bob. So it's good that we're able to get all this stuff together. If I can go to before I go to the first slide, I just want to mention that I started collecting 75 years ago now. It seems like an incredible long time. But I started basically in Norway, and this is going to be mentioned in the upcoming issue of the Min Record, which talks about field collecting. So I can actually say I actually did field collecting for a while. And one of the first specimens I picked up is this piece of pyrite I got in Norway in 1949. Wow. And it's fitting that it's pyrite because the recipient of this year's award is very, very well known for pyrite. You would think that somebody like me collects mainly gemstones and large crystals and I'll be interested in crystals like this, but pyrite is a particularly fascinating crystal form for me. So I have a number of pyrite crystals, including those from locations that Bob has collected in. But if we can go now to the slides, Brian. This is the 11th Annual American Heritage Mineral Award. It is one that I helped set up with Wendell 11 years ago. And Wendell provides an award, and there's an article that will come out in the Min Record about this. But you can see here the committee of people who understand the value and the beauty and the rarity of great minerals. You can see the committee, which includes a number of the award winners. I'm proud to say that the first award went to the only member of this group that is now deceased, which happens to be Brian Svoboda's father, Ed Svoboda. Ed is one of the reasons I set up the award, because he had done such an amazing job of collecting many, many minerals in many, many different locations. Wendell and I decided to put this award together, and here we are. So you can see the award winners and the committee members. Next slide, please. This is the actual award recipients, and you see at the bottom the final name there is Bob Jackson in 2012. And surrounding all this are just pictures of the amazing specimens that have been collected by these particular individuals at one time or another. And they are among the greatest mineral specimens ever assembled. And these came out in the last 20, 30, 40 years. So it's a tribute to the collecting facility of these people that they were able to bring these specimens out and populate collections and museum displays with such fine specimens. Next slide. Now there's Bob Jackson, and on the left is a picture. I have to admit that Bob is the winner, and the picture on the left is probably a surprise to Bob, since it's not a picture of Bob. Next slide, please. It's actually last year's winner, Joe Doris. But Bob didn't have a picture of himself, and even though I cajoled him a number of times and said, I need a picture of you when you were a kid, he somehow didn't have one. So I couldn't have a picture, an exhibit, a presentation without a picture of a young Bob Jackson. So I took the freedom of substituting my own choice of a young picture. That is not Bob, that is Joe on the left. Anyway, Bob is our award winner. Next slide. Now, why Bob? Why do we choose the winners? How do we come about the criteria? The criteria, as Brian mentioned earlier, is that a lifelong passion for collecting over many years, collecting of fine mineral specimens, and having pulled them out of the cavity or the ground or the quarry or whatever by your own hands. So, if you go to the next slide, there are two ways to build a collection. There's the Bill Larson way, which is he charges a reasonable sum for a nondescript specimen, and the people to whom he tries to deal with object, of course. And in the next slide, you see that we come to terms that he has sold another one of the finest of everything that has ever been sold. And I have parted with all the money on the table, and I can build a collection that way. That's one way of building a collection. There is, fortunately, another way. Next slide. And that is the way of Bob Jackson, who does what he did on the left, crawling into these holes, digging around in the dark, getting muddy and bitten and dirty, and then pulling out these wonderful specimens, such as the amethyst that is shown on the right. And this is why Bob has been chosen for the American Mineral Heritage Award as a recipient for the American Mineral Heritage Award. He has done this, and he has done this many, many times in many, many places. Next slide. I was trying to put together a map, and I finally got tired of putting together a map, so I just chose the western side of the United States for some of the locations that Bob has collected in. And I want to point out that not only collected, you have to have collected personally these things, but you've had to pull out great specimens from these places. And you've had to do it over and over again over the years. This shows some of the places on the west coast of the United States that Bob has collected in. And the next slide shows even more of the places all over the world. And in fact, as Bryan pointed out, Bob has set up geological tours to many of these places, and he takes people both on educational and collecting trips to these locations in order to pull out these wonderful specimens that now populate so many collections, such as mine, and just about anybody who is a serious collector of minerals has specimens from Bob Jackson. So this is just a wonderful list of things that Bob's done, traveling the world, pulling out great specimens. Next. Fortunately, it's always easy. You know, you can just get a piece of equipment and you dig in there, and you know, all of a sudden the specimens just come tumbling out. And you pick out the few good ones and you sell them to collectors and all that. But it really, I think, and Bob will talk more about this when he's interviewed by Bryan, it's serious hard work in unforgiving places. Next slide. But when you do this hard work, you pull out specimens such as this particular quartz and pyrite specimen. And he has done this in this case in the Denny Mountain, Washington, one of the locations for which Bob is most well known. You can see the collecting and the results of the collecting. Next slide. But you have to do it over and over again. So here's more of Denny Mountain. And the next slide. We'll show one of the other places in Arizona where he dug out these wonderful specimens. Location I didn't know much about, even though I lived in Arizona for 25 years. I never knew much about this. I've been to Tombstone, of course, but I did not know about this location. And these are very, very, very attractive specimens. Next slide. And of course, when I was collecting species, I had to have a specimen from this particular mine of the barites, and Bob collected there and probably pulled out the barite that I once owned many, many years ago. And so again, different locations, great specimens from each of these, which now populate all the world's museum collections, as well as all the world's collectors' collections. Next slide, please. I have a pet parrot, as does Gail Spahn. We both love our parrots. And other people have dogs and cats. We used to have dogs and cats. Bob is, that's less animate object that he is petting there. It's one of the specimens that he is like. So, well, people like pets. Bob likes rock. By the way, Bob, you can answer as a trivial question when you get to the interview of whether you have animals as well. Next slide. And this is one of the best realgars that has come out from the West Coast. This is one that Bob pulled out a number of years ago. And again, you start to get the idea of the profusion of different kinds of species and specimens, sizes and quality that Bob has picked up during his passionate years of collecting. Next slide. There he is again at another place in Montana with the little gem. And this is another one that has turned out specimens. that I have in my collection. It's hard to be a collector and not know of or have heard of Bob Jackson, which is why he's a fitting recipient for this year's award. Next slide. And you can see some of the crystals that have come out of that particular location. Next slide. Just wonderful. And I have a passion. I love scepter quartz and twin quartz and all kinds of funny quartz crystals. And I just love these kinds of specimens. And I wish I had been able to dig out these kinds of things. Next slide. Some of the specimens that Bob brought out, of course, are just really nice and they're good for collecting. Some of them are just so outstanding that they just make you look in awe at the specimen that was pulled out. Like this particular one from Washington, this quartz and pyrite. Wonderful example. Next slide. Bob at work at the Spruce Ridge, digging out things. And again, this is, as Bob will attest to, I'm quite sure, really hard work, really tough, hard work, often very dangerous places. Next. And some of the specimens that are pulled out as a result of all this. As I say, I have a fascination with pyrite because it comes in so many beautiful forms. The explanations for why these crystals come out in these different shapes, from pyridahedrons to cubes to octahedrons and so forth, is a study in its own. And the reason you see the striations on the faces of the pyrite crystals is one of those things that people write scholarly papers about. Next slide. A moment of relaxation after a hard day of collecting in one of the rugs. Next slide. Now, as was alluded to earlier, Bob has also done a lot of stuff with kids and with adults and with a lot of people, taking them on collecting trips and educational trips all over the world. And I think it's a tribute to the passion of Bob Jackson that he has been able to do this and do it successfully and actually build a business out of being able to do this. So this is another reason why he was chosen as the American Mineral Heritage Award winner. Next slide. Some more of the stunning specimens that were pulled out. The one on the left is a specimen that used to be in my collection. Just such a stunning pyridahedron sitting on top of a quartz crystal cluster. So, question, did he deserve the award? Yes. More of his specimens. Next slide. More of his specimens. The one on the left is, from a point of view of a crystallographer, is just an intriguing, beautiful, beautiful specimen. And then the ametrine specimens from Bolivia. There's a cut one that's not one of his collections, but it's just to show the beautiful specimen, the beautiful trillium that has been cut out of the kinds of things that Bob found. So we think that Bob is well deserving. The next slide, please. So the 2022 American Mineral Heritage Award winner, Bob Jackson. But now, this is Brian's show and he has questions. He said that he's going to dispense with some of the questions and things because of the location from which they are doing the thing. But I had a question, which is that, Bob, you have collected in many important places. So if we can go to the next slide. They are not only important, they are dangerous. So here's a teaser for Brian Swoboda to pick up on. Bob, on one of your trips, you had some fairly dangerous encounters with fairly dangerous animals. You are wise and expert in being able to avoid the dangers associated with these animals, but you had one particular instance where I guess at night, some dangerous creature infiltrated your campground and frightened you. it might have been a Bigfoot encounter. You never mentioned to me whether or not it was. But perhaps in the question and answer period, you might address this particular incident and tell people how you managed to survive this dangerous encounter, which left all kinds of strange animal marks that really got you into a position of a defensive position. So I'd appreciate it if you defend yourself during this question and answer period. Bob, congratulations. Back to you, Brian.
All right. Well, Bob, huge congratulations. Really, really happy for you. Let's go ahead and spotlight my camera. There we go. Congratulations for you. Really proud for you. You well deserved. I'm going to give you a chance to, I'm going to assume that for a moment that a Bigfoot encounter was not Gene Meieran at night. And I'm going to give you a chance to answer that question first, and then you can respond to being the recipient of this year's award. So go ahead, Bob.
All right. Well, no, I have never seen Gene Meieran in the field when he resembled Bigfoot, but I've seen him other times in the field. And I'll tell that story a little later, but
okay.
But I thank you so much for the award. I am very proud to have received it, and somewhat humbled when I look at the other group of people who have received it as well. It's a very nice group to be part of. Thank you so much.
Well earned, and I couldn't think of a better people to join that group. Bob, as you know, what I like to do on the show is turn back the clock a little bit, and so I want to go back to your time growing up in the 60s in New Jersey and how you first got interested in the mineral collecting world. So what was it that first grabbed your attention, whether or not you even remember the particular specimen, and how that led to your life now?
Well, I don't remember the particular specimen, but I remember a particular person. When I was 11 years old, I had a summer job that I created myself. Most of my jobs I've created myself. I had a summer job mowing lawns in our neighborhood. And one of my customers was Dr. Franklin, who at that time was the director of the Hayden Planetarium at the American Museum in New York. And Dr. Franklin was interested in everything, certainly every natural science. And in the course of a summer of getting to know him, he said, well, you know, in the fall, Bob, my wife and I want to take you to the American Museum and show you some of the mineral specimens we have there. And I mean, that was just like blowing my socks off. I had no idea those kind of specimens even existed. My very first collecting in New Jersey was at a couple of quarries. The most well-known one at the time is called Snake Hill. Name. It actually was the home of an insane asylum way back in the day.
So it was actually very apropos for mineral collectors.
Yes. Yes, I am living proof.
Now, you spent some time over with Dick Houck at Franklin. Tell us about that and how that influenced you.
Well, just meeting Dick was great for me because Dick is, I don't know, about 10 or 15 years older than me. And so I was very new to mineral collecting at the time, and Dick knew everybody and where to go. And so I just kind of became his sidekick for a while. And we had a wonderful time together, and I learned most of the do's and don'ts about collecting, you know, how to use the tools and how to, of course, we had way different tools then than we have now, but how to basically do some heavy work gently. And that's the whole crux of mineral collecting right there. We're looking at pieces that are stuck in a mountain or in a quarry, and they are very fragile. And if we damage them at all, they have no value. I mean, just right. A little nick on a museum specimen would make it not a museum specimen. So I had the good fortune to learn a lot of collecting techniques from Dick. And they've just continued through my life, and I've had so many mentors and so many other people that I've learned from. It's just been a wonderful ride.
Now, for a while, you went down the dark path of journalism, and then you ended up doing a little time in Vietnam in the Navy. But when that was over, you kind of saw the light and came back into mineral collecting. Tell us about that journey there.
Well, that journey isn't exactly correct. It's
okay.
I was never in Vietnam. I was drafted during the Vietnam War.
Gotcha. Okay.
And just my good luck, I never went to Vietnam. Instead, I spent 2 years in the New York City area, working for an outfit called Navy Mars, the military affiliate radio system. The people who run Navy Mars, believe it or not, believe that if all communications in the U.S. Suddenly go to pot in a war situation, radio operators would take over. And my job was getting together a bunch of ham operators into groups that would continue a communication link. Fortunately, that has never happened, but it was most interesting setting it up.
I could imagine that would be critical in that kind of situation where communication's down and this is independent of any kind of infrastructure. So when you finished that, how did you didn't just get into mineral collecting, you got into field collecting. And I think a lot of people may mistake that they are the same, but they're really not. There's a little something extra that drives the field collector. I know my father, was obviously one. So how did you make that transition into field collecting?
Well, I guess the most important part of it was getting my driver's license in New Jersey. We could get out on my own. But I started field collecting when I was about 14. And, depended on friends and friends of friends and family to cart me around to East Coast localities like Herkimer, New York, or Franklin, New Jersey, or Ellensburg, New York, and places that were either old mining areas or where there was highway construction. I think I got 2 years worth of collecting out of when the route I-80 went through the Watchung Ridge in New Jersey. And the Watchung Ridge quarries have produced beautiful things for years and years. And when the highway went through, more material came out in those 2 years than I think of the 100-year history of Watchung Ridge quarries. So there were just every weekend, there were just mineral specimens flowing out of the highway cut everywhere. And so that's where I met people like Dick Houck and Neil Yedlin, some others whose name don't come to me right now. Anyway, it put me in a much larger group and at a higher level of collecting than I'd been on my own.
Wonderful. Now, you also did the transition of becoming a claim owner. And I know we've got a bunch of great photographs of some of the claims that you've worked. Do you remember what was the first claim that you took over? And it almost seems like that started a whole trend. Is that a correct observation? Or yes, tell me about that.
Yeah. So that trend that it started was the first place that I had a claim was in what's now called Spruce Ridge in Washington. Its name back then was the Spruce number 16 claim. And that's because all of the mining claims in this valley, the middle fork of the Snoqualmie River Valley in Washington, were filed by, filed by a big mining company back in the 50s. And so they were all numbered. There were 192 claims in the claim group. And wow. I met a fellow, he was about 90 years old at the time. His name was Don Gilbreth. And so I went collecting with Don. I asked him if I could have permission to collect on his claims. And he said, well, sure, young man, just come on over here and we need to go up this mountain together. So Don and I started taking a walk up this mountain. Now, he was in his, I'm guessing, early 80s at the time, and I was in my mid 20s. And we got to a place where there was essentially a crevasse in the rock, just a crack in the rock that Don led me to the edge and just casually jumped across 3 or 4 feet of free space. And now this is a guy in his 80s, and I'm a guy in my 20s, and I'm getting to the edge, and my knees are knocking. No way in hell I'm jumping across that, man. And he's, oh, come on, So anyway, he convinced me, and I went across to the other side with him. And that is the group of claims that were the first claims I owned. And actually, Don Gilbreth was such a good friend. He gave me the first couple of claims I owned in the Middle Fork. And then when he died about 10 years later, he left me quite a few more, including spruce, in his will. And I had to deal with some other members of his family that were not all that knocked out about him kind of adopting me, but it all came out in the end, and I think everybody's happy today.
Terrific. Well, let's talk about spruce a little bit. Spruce was one of the chapters that was included in the American Mineral Treasures book that came out, what was that, 2008, 2009?
Yeah, I think 2008. Yep.
Oh, yeah, okay, I think you're right, 2008. And for those who are unfamiliar with that book, and I believe you can still find copies, I think it's out of print, but you can still find copies on the market. It focused on the most important mineral claims in the United States of America. And Gene Meieran was very involved with that project, and it also went hand in hand with a 2008 TGMS exhibit where all these different claims or locales that were featured in the book were also exhibited at the 2008 TGMS show. So you wrote the chapter for spruce. Tell us a little bit about spruce. Tell us a little bit about spruce, and maybe we can look at some photographs of that I have.
See this, Brian?
Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect.
This is the book. Carol's going to help me handle it here.
Thank you, Carol.
I'm not used to holding heavy books at arm's length in front of a camera. I guess that was obvious by the way it was bouncing around.
Well, I mean, but that book it's a fantastic book, and it's getting pretty close to what some people would call a lap breaker. It's so rich with photographs and information.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about spruce. Tell us about your involvement and how that became just so iconic for a classic American mineral locality.
Well, spruce is an outgassing breccia, so it's a cliff that looks like a sponge. The sponge being expanded, into the holes in the sponge being 4 to 6 feet across and maybe 20 feet long, and all of that is mineralized. So when you first walk up to spruce, you see kind of a rusty cliff and all of these holes in the rock. And the very first day I was there, I had gone up with one of the profs I had at the University of Washington. And so my geology prof and I walked up to spruce, and I was like, "Hey, Doc, what do you think of this place?" And he was like, "Wow, how did you get access?" And so I told him how I got access. And anyway, I collected a piece that summer. That was, I can't tell you the date right off the top of my head. But anyway, I collected a piece that I liked a lot. And I brought it to show the prof. And I said, "So, Doc, what do you think of this piece?" And it was a perched pyrite. And when we get to looking at more pictures, or if you can grab one of the pictures, Brian, you could show from the spruce section, you can see that it's got a perched pyrite on a quartz plate.
Let me switch that. This is not a perched pyrite. Oh, here's a good shot of a perched pyrite.
Yeah. That one I am in the process of repairing, or I was when the photo was taken. Very often the pyrites come off of the quartz that's supporting them. There's a layer of goethite or limonite underneath, and that absorbs water. And so they essentially rust themselves off the quartz crystals. But this is certainly how they formed and how they were when I collected them. So anyway, I took a rock, something like this one, a little smaller, to show to my prof and said, "Hey, Doc, what do you think of this?" And he went, "Do you want to sell it?" "No, I don't want to sell it, Doc. It's the coolest thing I've ever found." And the next thing he said changed the route of my life. He said, "How about $5,000? Now, this was in this was in the early 1980s.
That's some serious money back then.
It certainly was. Yeah. And so, I kind of reordered my life at that point and went into
Your next question was, is that in cash?
It probably was in 1980.
I knew you were quite clever.
Yeah, well, seeing as how I couldn't have imagined that this thing was worth $5,000 at the time. Of course, today you could add a zero to that, but at the time I was a college kid, and I collected this pretty rock, and I was anxious to show it to my prof, and the idea that someone could make a living doing this just had never entered my mind.
That is amazing. That is such an incredible story that a professor would offer such a huge amount of money for a specimen at that time.
I mean, that a professor even had that amount of disposable income in 1980. I don't know what else he did for a living.
Well, we don't talk about that.
Nah, we won't go there.
Bob, let me pull up a couple other specimens from spruce, and you can go ahead and tell us about that.
Sure.
About these, rather.
This is a piece. This came out in 2012 or 2013, and you can see that there's a crack through the middle of the matrix. So it's got beautiful quartzes and pyrites. Everything is pristine on the piece. No obvious breaks, except right down the middle. There's this big crack. It would be very hard, despite how much Gene has told us he likes pyrite. I doubt that someone with a collection like Gene's would want a matrix piece that has a big cleft through the middle. It looks like somebody broke it. In fact, it broke shortly after it formed, and there were actually calcite crystals growing in that cleft, but it made an ugly specimen. So here, this is what's happening there is I'm cutting that specimen in half with a diamond saw, a drop saw, actually. And so as long as the blade of the saw stays well away from the crystals, when the trim is done, no one will know that it's been sawed in half. That's right on. Kind of the art of trimming. And
sure,
it just makes it look natural again.
Yeah. Let me pull up this next photo, and a little bit blurry, but you can kind of really get the idea of the combination of the pyrite and the quartz with the beautiful striations on the faces of the pyrite there.
Yeah, and this is the size I collect.
Okay.
This is a small cabinet, and I collect miniatures in small cabinets. And frankly, the reason I do that is when I started working spruce, we were in a zone that produced huge pieces that weighed 50 or 80 pounds, or even 110, I think was the heaviest we ever took out. And those kind of things we had to fly down the mountain by helicopter. So, I prefer to collect all things this size. So this piece sits nicely in the palm of my hand.
Nice.
It's ideally the size I like to collect. And this is perfect all the way around. That's called a floater. So
that's a floater.
It's been the specimen around in the photo. You'd see that there are quartz crystals sticking out the backs of the pyrite as well.
My Lord. And how many pieces do you have in your personal collection?
In my personal collection, I have about 200. But
wow.
Most of them are not spectacular like this, because I started out as a quartz collector, and I really like the mineral quartz, and it comes in so many odd forms, and the oddities are what really get my attention. So, I like scepters, and I like twins, and I like crystals that intergrow. like conclusions. And so when I say I have a couple hundred specimens, quite a few of them have no particular value except to me. And I love that I get to do it. It's one nice thing about owning claims or owning localities. You get first pick. So although I do have to sell the specimens, the expensive ones, to make a living, the choice of which one to keep is definitely mine.
Now, here you are. I assume that's you?
Actually, no, that was one of my collecting partners. That's Archer McGill. I was taking the photo here. And so this is just a side look at spruce. So they're behind Archer. That's a bench that we were currently working at the time. And this was the way you got there. You put on your climbing harness and you climbed up the cliff. And let's see, the bug just off of Archer's right hip, the one that is behind him there. That was about 2 feet in diameter when we hit it, and it produced almost 1,000 pounds of quartz and pyrite clusters. Now, we don't sell things per pound, but that's a lot of specimens if you're thinking about things that'll fit in the palm of your hand.
Now, how are these exposed to the outside? Are you drilling into them, or is it hand picking into them? How do you expand that bug?
So the rock there is granodiorite, and we drill and blast every day. And the trick to drilling and blasting, and when you're working with fragile minerals, is to use the drill kind of like a sensory organ. So you want to be able to process the information that you're getting from the drill as you're drilling, like how quickly it penetrates the rock, or if there's any pyrite dust coming out of the drill hole. That would be a very bad thing. We don't want to see that happen.
Right.
The places we put the drill, the places we make the holes, are important for where the explosives go later. And ideally, we come back after a blast and we don't see any specimens laying on the ground. What we see is a maze of cracks going into the hill. And then we exploit those cracks just like anybody else with a hammer and chisel would do.
So are you occasionally suspending your pneumatic drill with ropes and drilling into the side of the mountain like this?
Yeah, that's where we work. Yeah.
My Lord, that's not easy.
No, it's not particularly easy. And it's why I did it when I was younger. I am retired from that particular part of it now. I still do the prep and I still, get to the localities, but the heavy work is definitely done by people 20 years younger than me or younger than that.
Sure. Now I'm looking at this photo here, and this is, I assume that might be you kind of sneaking into a little vug there. Yep. The obvious question that comes to mind is, what brand of washing machine do you have at home? Because thinking of all the places you've explored, I mean, you either own stock in Levi Strauss or you have one heck of a machine.
We actually have a party among the guys working up there at the end of every season where we burn our clothing.
Oh my God, I love that.
Home. It's either it would go in some, horrible display in some detergent manufacturer's office, or it gets burned. And so we have a party and we burn our clothes.
That is incredible. And of course, that kind of work gives you pieces like this. And like we saw earlier, this floater, which, this kind of thing just blows my mind, and the delicacy of those quartz. You hear the stories of how when you find, when there are all these new pieces coming out of Pakistan, you always hear the story of them having to carry it off the mountain on their back. It's not too much dissimilar to what you're doing here. You have to wrap all those pretty darn carefully and carry those down off the mountain. You had mentioned something about lifting the heavier pieces off, and I think I remember you telling me a story of a helicopter accident that might have happened during one of your adventures.
Do you have a picture of that?
I don't have a picture, but I remember quite well the story. Maybe you can share that with our audience.
Okay, so I was working with John Medici and Sandy Ludlam at the time. This was at the very beginning of my work in spruce and other claims in the Middle Fork Valley. And so Sandy and John were flying in from Ohio, and Neil Pfaff was another partner in that, and he had already hiked up to the locality that we were going to, and which was called Katy Bell Ridge. And so I picked up John and his son Jay Medici in my Volkswagen, and I drove them up the Middle Fork Road, and which is a horrible road. But anyway, we got there and delivered them to where the helicopter was going to land, which was next to a bridge. There's no place to land up next to the locality. And so the helicopter, stopped, picked them up, and they flew away. And I had asked the pilot, was he familiar with the area he was going to? And he just looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, oh, of course I am, And he had a map in his hand. And he said, you're going right here, right next to Big Heart Lake. Well, the map was at a considerably different scale than what you were going to be able to tell from the air. So yeah, I said, yes. So what you do is you follow the Middle Fork Valley, and then you fly up this creek called Burnt Boot Creek. And when you come to a vertical wall, you will see our blue tents on top of that wall. And he goes, yeah, righto, and he took off. Well, that night I got home after climbing back down the mountain and driving out of the Middle Fork. And I expected to have a phone call from the pilot saying, I dropped them off at this time and just, kind of safety stuff. But there was no phone call like that. And so I called the pilot's house and I got no answer. And that concerned me. So Carol and I discussed what to do next. I didn't have anybody that I knew that the pilot knew. So I looked up the business that the pilot worked for, and I called the Civil Air Patrol. And I told them this story, and I said, it's really curious. The guy should have been back hours ago. And so the long story is he didn't get back because he crashed his helicopter in a lake. And he did a very good job of crashing, if that can make any sense to you.
Falling with style.
With style, yeah. It's actually called settling with power. There's anyone who flies helicopters can tell you what that term means. It means you put on the brakes and you can't stop. You don't have enough power to pull back out of the descent that you've been in. And so the pilot did a very good job. He calmly said to John, John, when we hit the water, I want you to open your door and throw your son out into the water. And then I will dive in and follow him, and I'll do what I can. Well, what he could do. So after John and Jay were out of the helicopter, what the pilot did was he rolled it over as hard as he could with the power he still had, so it would crash into the lake. And it actually caught fire. So that's the picture I was hoping you have. I didn't know we were going to discuss this. If you remind me sometime, I'll send you that picture.
Absolutely. I've seen the pictures. You've shared that with me. And I always thought it was just such an incredible story. And that's probably why John and Jay just focused on Herkimer after that.
Could be. A lot safer, no helicopters involved.
Exactly. Bob, let's take a look at some of these other photographs that you've sent me. I'm going to start with this cute little guy here. And I think anyone who's familiar with any kind of animals anywhere knows where this guy, what continent this guy's from.
Yeah. Well, these guys, when we were working in Australia, I dug in Australia just about every winter, North American winter, because, there's snow in the mountains here. So I wanted to work somewhere else. So I started going to Australia. I think our first trip was in '89. And for the next 10 or 15 years, I was in Australia at least once a year. And it was always in late November or December or January, when the Northwest was not a good place to be collecting, but there were good things to be found in Australia. Can you go to the next one? So in Australia, we worked at a place called Marala. Marala is in the state of Victoria, and it's what we were digging in was clay, and this clay was derived from a rhyolite flow of volcanic rock that is full of holes and readily weathers to clay. So this was looking down into one of the holes we dug by hand. So the Marala is in a wildlife preserve, and so you can't use any power tools. And so every year when we went there, we started a new hole, and this hole, I believe, was 23 feet deep. So you start at the surface and you just start going down until you start finding crystals, and then you dig into the walls of the pit. And the really amazing thing about this locality is that the clay is entirely self-supporting. In the 15 or 18 years I worked there, I never saw a collapse in the clay zone. So you can see this ladder goes down 20 feet, and as you walk around the walls of the pit, there are like passages going off the side, and those were following bugs. So
interesting.
I've got a couple of specimens here I'll show you.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's cut back to your cameras. You can show us the specimens live.
Okay. So
all right.
Carol is going to hold one up here. These are Smoky quartz crystals on rhyolite.
Carol, can you move that a little bit closer to the center of the frame? Yeah, there we go.
All right, I'll get out of the frame.
Oh no, this is perfect. We can see your smiling face and the beautiful specimen.
All right, so the matrix, the rhyolite matrix, is covered with clear druzy quartz crystals. So these things are incredibly sparkly. When you find them, they're totally covered in mud, and so you can tell by the texture of the rock that what's going to be inside, but you don't get to see them when you're collecting. So here's another one. Smokies are a little bigger. The Smokies in this grouping are a little more than an inch long, but they often form these groups where they are perched right on top of a piece of rhyolite. So a spectacular place to collect. And I love the wildlife in Australia. So, we see koalas in the trees. My strangest bit of wildlife encounter there at Marala was, so I'm always working with a friend, and we dig the holes with hand tools, and then we have a hand windlass that we build in place, and we use that to raise the buckets of dirt that are, the worthless product. And then before we leave, we have to fill in the holes again because it is a wildlife preserve. So anyway, I'm digging in a hole one day and something goes plop right beside me. And I look around and it's a wallaby.
No.
This wallaby was hopping across the ground surface and just didn't notice that there was a hole. And so, okay, I'm in a 20-foot deep hole and I have a wallaby for company. What do I do? And I had no idea what to do. So I had a gunny sack, and I thought maybe if I was quick, I could just put the gunny sack over the wallaby's head and haul it up the ladder. But wallabies didn't want to be caught, or this particular one at any rate. I only met one. I saw lots, but anyway, this was the only one whose acquaintance I met. And so every time I would advance toward the wallaby would jump over my head. And if we had a video of this, the wildlife channels would love it. But no, this happened in the bottom of a hole in Australia. There's no video.
That would have played back perfectly with the Benny Hill theme. Dun, 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 dun. Fantastic. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but this specimen that I have up on the screen is one of the specimens that you dug out there. Maybe we can highlight my screen. One of the specimens that you dug out there, similar to the ones that you just showed us live.
Right. So this is a group. Many of the groups at Marala are doubly terminated, and so you'll find loose groups of doubly terminated crystals. I think that one is about 6 centimeters, and the Smokies are fairly clear. I kind of laugh with my friends who are mineral collectors, and that I've never worked in gem material. So, when you look at silver pick collectors like Gene was talking about in the beginning, generally people who are buying things that are are buying expensive minerals, they're buying gem minerals, or they're buying gold.
Right.
I collect quartz crystals, the most common mineral on Earth. So I really didn't think I would ever get to the point where my name would be known widely. But that's how it worked out. And, along the way, I had many incredible adventures. I've been all around the world collecting rocks, and it's been great fun.
Well, you have truly been blessed with that, and all of us have been blessed with what you've pulled out. I know that we have a lot more photos and a lot more photos of specimens that you sent us. We are kind of starting to run out of time, but before we go, I wanted to make sure that there was a chance for you to talk a little bit about Geology Adventures, why you started that, what it does, and how it gives back to the community, because I think it's a very important thing. In the meantime, a lot of the viewers, you may see that a window has popped up, and these are the 5 questions. And Bob, if you see that window, or Carol, if you see that, you can go ahead and close it. You're not supposed to look at those questions, really. We'll ask that towards the end of the interview. But Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about Geology Adventure?
Sure. Well, when I met my wife, Carol, long before she was my wife, she was an elementary school teacher. And we both like kids. And so she asked me early on if I would come into class with her and just talk a little bit, like I'm talking a little bit with you guys, if I would talk a little bit about mineral collecting and maybe bring some crystal samples with me. Well, when you mine a place like Spruce or even Marala, you have thousands of quartz crystals just everywhere, they're part of your life. So I started doing classes, and the basis of the classes was teaching kids to identify minerals. And being a commercial collector, I have zillions of minerals just laying around that I don't have a particular need for at the time. And so we started having kids identify minerals that I could give them a specimen of. And so kids would sit in pods of 6 in a 3rd or 5th grade class, and I would hand out a selection of quartz crystals or calcite crystals or, common minerals, and say, okay, guys, so when you can tell me the name of these minerals using these tests, and we did hardness, streak, and cleavage were the 3 tests we used. Okay. When you can tell me the name of the minerals, you can keep them.
Wow. Incentivized.
I ended up doing an adult class based on the same thing, because I had so many parents call me after their kids had been in my class and say, we want to do this. We want to go to the places that you showed the kids slides of, So that was how the company was born. And when it started, I think the first year, maybe I did 4 trips, all in the Seattle area. And I am retired now, by the way, from Geology Adventures. But by the time I did the last trips in probably 2018, 2019, something around there.
Okay, not that long ago. Yeah.
No, I was taking a couple thousand people in small groups to any place I was working. And I had one group of fans, customers, who we called the Explorers Group. And what was different in the way they worked with me was that they went to me with places I was prospecting. So the explorers group went to places where, nobody had really found anything of importance yet, but I was pretty sure that the geology was right to develop a locality there. And so they were the guinea pigs, and they came along, and sometimes I drilled and blasted in these places. Sometimes we worked with hand tools. Sometimes we had an excavator, like any commercial mineral dealer does. But the idea was to send my guests home with pieces they would appreciate. And I have a lot of people who still talk about this, even though I'm not doing it.
Well, the one thing I really want to emphasize is something that comment that you just made that was almost a throwaway. A couple thousand, and I think, talking about the final year that you were involved with Geology Adventures before you retired. How many people do you think you've affected over the years?
I really have no idea, but I would guess 10,000 people.
Good God.
One trip together with me. We did 2-week-long trips in Spain in the last 10 years. And so we collected, the famous Navajoan pyrites.
The pyrites, yeah. I was just, we had an interview with Daniel Urabari yesterday talking about the pirates from Navajoan. And meanwhile, Raquel's ears just went up. Spain, let's go back. No, but think about that, Bob. That's, to me, what makes you such a hero. In addition to all the great stuff you've brought out, the very fact that you have created these real-life field collecting adventures for, as you estimate, maybe 10,000 people. And, even if you made a difference in 10% of those people's lives, that's a real impact that you've made to the mineral collecting community. So kudos to you, my friend.
I'm very proud of having done that. And I had no idea I was going to create an industry when I started taking people on field trips. What the main thing that happened was that the internet came along at the beginning, probably the first 5 or 6 years of Geology Adventures. People knew about me because I sent them a mailer.
Way back when.
Think about that today, right? So
exactly.
So Carol has just put a specimen from spruce in front of me. And,
okay.
Yeah, if you would, we'll bring you down a little bit. Can you
look at that?
This is a good one. So this came, and this is bigger than I normally collect, larger than I normally keep. But this was such a spectacular piece with how both the quartzes and the pyrites are pristine. And I don't know if you can see, but like in this crystal here and in that crystal there are pyrite inclusions as well inside the quartz crystals. So as this piece was forming, it was there were little pyrite crystals falling through the liquor, the hydrothermal fluid, and attaching to already quartz crystals, already formed quartz crystals, or sometimes just settling on the top of a quartz crystal, and then the quartz crystal continued growing and encapsulated the pyrites. So this is, these things are definitely some of my favorite things I've ever collected.
That's fantastic. And, I'll go back to the Spanish pyrites out of Navajoan. They tend to be more perfectly cubic with very few surface features on it. And the pyrites from spruce there, they tend to be, to my eye, they tend to be a little bit more rounded on the edges with the striations on it. But you also have that association with quartz. And you take something simple like pyrite, and I think it speaks to the general public because you see it almost as a perfect cube, and you can understand that, and you realize that, wow, that perfect cube was created in nature. But then you just start looking at pyrites, and there is such a variety of pyrites, and especially the ones that you're sharing with us here that have that association with the very delicate, beautiful quartz, especially when they're perched on top. It's just endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, so Carol is holding up a specimen. If you can rotate it, there you go. And
Look at that.
So you can see the quartz crystals sticking out. Now, this quartz crystal was doubly terminated when the pyrite formed, because otherwise you wouldn't see one termination outside the pyrite, and there's another one inside the pyrite that the pyrite grew on.
Incredible.
Other thing I like about this piece is right up on top, there's that two little pyrites that kind of make the letter Z. And
yeah,
I collected this. I said to my partner, if we ever get to meet ZZ Top, I am going to bring this specimen along and see how big their silver pick is.
You need a video of the ZZ Top guys holding that and doing the, the hand movement that they do.
Yep. So Brian, here's another. This is a fluorite crystals on quartz epimorphs after calcite. And this came from Tucson, Arizona. This was a deposit I found. Actually, a rancher took me on his property. Somebody I met at Tucson, just, not having anything to do with minerals. And we just got to talking. And he said, when I was doing some bulldozing to put in a stock tank up on my 6,000 acres, we hit a seam of a purple mineral. Somebody told me it was fluorite. And I said, oh, yeah, I'd be happy to come up sometime. So I went up to look. I had, as I often did in those days when I traveled, I just happened to have some dynamite with me. And
the good old days when we just had that in the back of the car.
Yeah. And anyway, so that material, when I put in the first couple of shots, I could see that obviously it wasn't amethyst, it was fluorite. And
right.
The first couple of pieces, they look kind of like driveway rock. Carol's going to hold up another one here. I mean, this is definitely not a mineral specimen. So I was blasting into a seam that had little tiny quartz crystals, mostly Jersey quartz, no color to them. It did have a little bit of purple coloration where the pyrite had actually indurated, had saturated the rock. And so anyway, this is the kind of stuff we found after the first couple of blasts. And so my collecting partner, Bruce, and I spent, I don't know, not much time, 3 or 4 days there. And we came up with a lot of stuff that looked like what Carol just held up. And I got a couple little bugs that had pretty little fluorite crystals sitting on bright white quartz epimorphs after pyrite. So you have a sparkly white surface with these pretty little purple fluorites perched out. And I'm really talking little, ½ inch at the largest. And so that's what we had found. And I wanted to work the area more. And I knew I was going to have to bring in heavy equipment. And in order to do that, I would have to landscape the area and, to make sure there wasn't any, I can't say that there was a stream there that would have, it would have had sediment in it, but it does rain hard in Arizona from time to time.
Sure.
And so anyway, I built a rock wall around this area, and I built the rock wall with that material that Carol had helped. Just
neat.
Ugly chalcedony with a little bit of purple showing through. And so I got home and I had taken some of that kind of ugly material with me just to kind of see what I could clean out of it, or maybe it would be lapidary material. There's a lot of different ways to sell rocks. So anyway, a couple of the pieces that I took home, I put them in acid, and much to my surprise, the masses of rock held these, once the limestone was gone, they held these beautiful epimorphs that become very delicate specimens. Carol's holding.
Wow.
So they have the negative shape of the original calcite rhombohedron inside. And then
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so just by putting those in acid, you got these fabulous treasures off things that you almost considered waste rock at the beginning.
Absolutely. Yes. The stuff that I built the rock wall out of, I came back.
How quickly did you tear that rock wall down?
Home by yellow freight. It probably took us 2 years to process all that stuff. So Carl's just going to show you several of these.
Oh, these are incredible. And I love that this is from Tombstone, which is not far away from where we are here in Tucson right now.
Not at all. No, it's just outside of Tombstone. In fact, it's directly across the mountain, the first mountain to the east of Tombstone. There's an airport there. And if you were to walk from the airport over the first mountain, you would be at this place, which is...
There it goes. And you have to pass through Tombstone to get to Bisbee from here. So, hey, you can go collect fluorite, go see the OK Corral, and then hit Bisbee. What a great trip.
So Carol's showing you one now that's this is a little paler color, but it's got wondrous form. This is a negative acute rhombohedron. So it's...
Carol, could you move that a little bit closer into the frame? There we go.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and I love these epimorphs. They're so interesting.
Oh, they are. And they're so lightweight. You know, there's, I've got a specimen here that's, it's almost a square foot, and it has pyrite crystals all over it. But the whole thing weighs 17 ounces. No, I don't have, I'm sorry. It's here on my table.
Fluorite.
Did I not say fluorite?
You said pyrite.
Oh, no, I'm confused. Oh, no. No, it's
pyrite, quartz, fluorite. It's all fantastic.
Common minerals, you know.
Hey, Bob, we are starting to kind of run out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fire off the quick fire of 5 questions. So the way this works is I've got 5 questions I'm going to ask you. Each question has 2 answers, and you have to tell me what your gut reaction is in terms of which answer you resonate with most strongly. Now, the audience has already answered this. They're guessing what you're going to say. All of your answers are correct. We're just going to see how the viewers are doing. Are you ready for this?
You bet.
Okay. Question number 1. Favorite outdoor place, up high in the mountains or down by the beach?
Up high in the mountains.
Up high in the mountains. Question number 2, and this is probably my favorite question from the list. Favorite burning event, Burning Man or burning clothes?
We don't have burning helicopter in there, but okay, burning clothes.
Touche. So what is it? Burning clothes, I'm guessing?
Burning clothing, yes.
Burning clothing, okay. Number 3, favorite food, surf or turf?
Turf in general.
Turf in general, right on. Favorite mining region, Africa or North America? We didn't get a chance to talk much about Africa, but let's just put the question out there anyway.
Africa.
Africa, okay. And this is really a tough, well, maybe not so tough. I think I know your answer. Favorite mineral, quartz or pyrite?
Definitely quartz.
Definitely quartz. All right. Let's go to the beautiful young ladies of...
Don't forget the other question about his encounter.
That's right. Okay. Tell us about the Bigfoot encounter.
Okay. So the Bigfoot encounter, Carol and I were camped at a Canadian locality called Chase. Chase is actually the name of the town. And there's a huge quartz vein there. And this was during the 80s when the quartz crystal movement was new. And I was selling quartz crystals from many places I mined. And I leased this little locality in Chase. And it's only maybe 2 acres. And so Carol and I rolled into there. We were going to sleep in the back of my pickup. So we probably got in at 11 o'clock at night, and all we did was walk around the back of the truck, climb into the bed, and to go to sleep. And I am a very sound sleeper. Not so much. So at some point, Carol woke me up just by kind of, tapping my shoulder. Hun. I said, oh, what's up? And she went, well, I heard something outside. And you have to know, one thing I absolutely love about my wife is that she does not spook easily. But she was spooked this night. And what am I going to do? I'm not going to say, well, go check it out yourself. That would be helpful. But anyway, I, got outside and climbed out of the truck and went all the way around the truck. I had a torch with me, a flashlight, and was looking under the truck, and I didn't see anything. There were no hoof prints. This is an area where cattle run free range, and there was absolutely nothing outside that could have made a noise. And so I crawled back in the truck and went on. I walked all the way around. I didn't see anything. And so that was that. And I got back in the truck and fell immediately asleep. And apparently Carol was satisfied and she went to sleep. I woke up at first light and Carol was awake. And I said, so babe, I'm going to get up and just have a look around the truck again. And so I did. And when I came back, she said, so you didn't find anything? I guess there was nothing to be excited about. Well, as I had gotten back into the truck, I saw that there was a print in the dust on the rear window of my pickup. And
oh boy.
I looked at it, and it looked for all the world that it had been made by a foot of I don't know what, a giant bird, maybe like a crow's foot, only this big. And this was in the dust on my window. And now I got spooked.
I'm spooked now.
Right. So I'm getting back in the truck, and Carol's telling me, oh, I'm sorry to have awakened you in your sleep. And I'm like, maybe you did hear something. Look at this print on the window. And as I'm opening the window, returning it to its fully open position for her to see, my other hand contacts the dust, and I make the identical print that I had been spooked by in the night. So I am probably the only geologist who was afraid of his own handprint.
Oh, that's classic. Perfect. That's the perfect story. All right. We're going to cut to my favorite two ladies here at Mineral Talks Live, and we're going to look at how our audience reacted. Are we ready for this, ladies?
Yes, we are. If
okay.
Everybody can hear us fine. Jean or Bob, can you give us a thumb up if you can hear us?
Okay.
We were going
Bob, can you hear us?
Bob, can you hear the ladies?
No.
Oh, yes, I do. Sorry.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
I guess
Okay.
So we're ready.
Thank you.
They were just staring at the faces there. I know. Okay. Question number one was favorite outdoor place up high in the mountains or by the beach? Bob predictably said up high in the mountains. Ladies, what did the audience say?
97% up high in the mountains. So yes.
Bing. Fantastic. Okay. Question number two, potentially the most difficult question. Favorite burning event, Burning Man or burning clothes?
People listen carefully to the interview. Burning clothes.
Burning clothes. They got it. I love it. Favorite food, surf or turf? Bob went with turf.
Turf, indeed.
Turf, indeed. And so everyone is looking for that, the monster handprint to cook over the barbecue here. Favorite mining region, Africa or North America? What did our audience say?
Well, I think we got a bit sidetracked here by the good stories of Spruce Springs as well. So a lot of people answer North America.
Yeah, I would have gone with North America as well. But Bob, we're going to have you back for an extended interview to talk about Africa.
All right. Sounds good.
Final question, favorite mineral, quartz or pyrite? That's tough, but I think if anyone paid attention, they would have gotten
Again,
it.
people paid a lot of attention to the interview and they answered quartz mostly. So good one, viewers. Thanks for staying with us. I know it was a bit difficult to hear Bob sometimes, so thanks for your comprehension and thanks for following the interview. Perfect.
Okay, and where are we? Do we have Q&A questions?
Yes.
We have a few questions.
Okay, I'm going to let the ladies run the Q&A. So take it away.
Jean, actually, the first question is to you. Have any woman ever won or been nominated for the American award?
There has been no. The answer is no woman has been awarded. No one has yet been nominated.
So what do we have to do to change that?
Well, I guess there are two ingredients that have to be put there. Number one is a history of collecting fine mineral specimens that have ended up in great collections and in great exhibitions. And number two is have a sponsor who nominates you, somebody that says that what you've done over your lifetime of collecting brings you into the category, such as the specimens that were shown by Bob or Brian Lees or Bill Larson and so forth. So it's those two things. There's no discrimination. The one part that bothers me about the award, which is sort of an artifact again about who the people are, is that we don't have any women on the board of the committee that decides at this time. But to get there again, you just have to have the collection, the ability, the specimens, and the history to go along with it.
We have to change that.
Yeah, and it was a good point as well for the board, not any woman on the board. So yes. Next question then.
Yeah, so we have a question from Barbara. Regarding watch and rich quarries, Bob, did you ever get to the new Strip Trap Rock Quarry in Patterson, New Jersey for zeolites and amethyst?
I certainly did. When I was a kid, that was one of my hangouts. I actually saw a very odd thing happen at the New Street Quarry. I was there. This was right after I had my driver's license. And so I was there and I was collecting an amethyst bug in the wall of the quarry. And there was an older gentleman who came into the quarry while I was there. And he obviously was a little upset that I was collecting this bug and he hadn't found much. And, the bug was only this big. It wasn't like I could say, oh, jump in here. I'm just collecting the bugs. Anyway, he just kept inching closer and closer to me as the afternoon went on. And at some point, I was going to have lunch. And I just said to him, hey, I'm going to have lunch if you'd like to take over this bug. And he went, you'd really do that? Well, of course, it's just another amethyst bug. And I had collected many of them at that point. And anyway, so he took over. And shortly thereafter, another guy came into the quarry. And the guy who I talked to knew the second guy. And the second guy settled into a place along the wall of the quarry that was under an overhang. So there was a projecting rock above him. And when he did that, I walked over and I said to the guy, I'm sure you've collected a lot more than I have, but I don't think I would collect underneath that overhanging rock because we're vibrating the quarry walls. And back then they were blasting weekly at the New Street Quarry. And anyway, long story short, or shorter, before I left that day, that rock fell and seriously injured the gentleman who had crawled under.
Oh, no.
Certainly gave me pause forever. I mean, you're tempted so many times when you're in the field of, oh, maybe I'll just take a little more rock off here and you particularly now that we work with things like diamond chainsaws, where we can basically decompose the rock and, and move into the mountain. It's a really good idea to be safe when know that you're safe when you do that.
Very good point. Thank you. We have another question from before, and he's talking about the spruce claim. Is there any structural controls on the intrusive breccia or more linear zones along the shears?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing that question.
Sorry, yes, maybe. Mike, we are trying to be at the same level, but maybe it doesn't work. So the question is about the spruce claim. Is there any structural controls on the formation of the claim, or is more the intrusive breccia along some linear zones or shears? So what's more, an intrusive process, or is more controlled by structural linear planes?
Are you asking geologically? Is it more
Yes.
controlled by it is definitely controlled by the structure of the breccia. And so as the breccia is called an outgassing breccia, which means that as the bubble of gas that was inside in what became the breccia, as the bubble of gas rose, it actually fractured the rock. So if you can orient yourself, when you're in an outgassing breccia, they're oriented. And if you can see how the orientation was, this is where being a geologist helps. Most of the time, I'm just a rock collector. But if you can orient yourself to how it actually formed, you'll be a lot more successful collecting it.
Very good.
Answer the question?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, good.
And then one more question is by Stephen Bliscal. He grew up in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, graduated in 1966, member of Trailside Mineral Club. He's asking if you by any chance met each other at the show in the 60s. I'm going to ask Carol.
I wasn't there in the 60s.
Yeah, I know you weren't there in the 60s. Yeah.
That's okay.
I think I may have been doing things in the 60s that affected my memory.
And there we have it. It's permanently recorded, a confession.
And Brian, I think that's
at my door.
Perfect. Well, Bob, that's going to bring it to the end of the show. I'm going to ask one more request. Feel free to politely deny if you don't feel like it. But I know that you are a fixture usually at the mineral shows. Of course, COVID being the exception the last couple of years. But by your side, whenever I see you at the mineral shows, there's also Carol, and she's been so instrumental in helping for this interview. I would love to get her on the camera just so that everyone can say hi to her.
I have to tell you, Carol is very camera shy, but she's coming. Here she is.
She's saying, "Move over, honey." All right. Thank you so much, Bob, Carol, for your for agreeing to be on the program. Bob, congratulations again on being the 2022 recipient of the American Mineral Heritage Award. That's a very proud accomplishment, and it's very, as everybody can see now, it's very, very well deserved. For all of you viewers out there, thank you so much for tuning in to this special edition of Mineral Talks Live. Oh, I'm actually going to end the show with this camera angle. Thank you all for tuning in today. If you're coming to Tucson, be safe. Look forward to seeing you here, and we will see you again early March, the first Wednesday of March, our next show.
Our next show. Thank
all
you
right,
so much.
take care, everyone.
Good to see you here. Good to be in Tucson.